All right, John, are you about ready to get going?
Sure am.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and introduce us. So thanks for everyone for tuning in or joining us in person here at Destination Panama City. Um, Happy March. March is Seagrass Awareness Month. So this month we have a guest speaker from AquaTech Eco Consultants tuning in to talk about seagrass restoration happening here in our bays. If you've never been to Tides and Talks before, this is a community meeting that we host. St. Andrew and St. Joseph Bay Estuary Program hosts each month, and we feature guest speakers that come and talk about different topics that may be of interest to people who live in our watershed. So John is going to take it from here. Um, he is online today. This is our first virtual speaker, so he'll be tuning in online. You can see him there. Yep, there he is. Cool. All righty. And then you just tell me when you want me to skip around for you.
All right. I appreciate the introduction. Thank you very much. Again, my name is John Brucker. I work with AquaTech Eco Consultants. I was formerly with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection for about 21 years. And from 2016 to 2024, I managed the Central Panhandle Aquatic Preserves, which included St. Joseph Bay and St. Andrews Bay Aquatic Preserves. And so now that I work for a private contractor, we do a lot of seagrass restoration work amongst other environmental restoration projects. So when asked to be able to talk about the work that my company has done in St. Joe Bay, as well as in some planned and upcoming projects in the St. Andrews system, we're always more than happy to chat. So if you would like to advance the slide, that would be great. Again, just as I work for AquaTech, you can go back one slide just real quick.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yep. Not a problem. We also have our nonprofit listed on there, Ecosphere Restoration Institute. I'll be talking a little bit about them. The reason they're included is because, as I mentioned, they're our nonprofit. And for our seagrass restoration projects that we're doing currently, we receive legislative funding through Ecosphere, and then Ecosphere contracts AquaTech for the work. So you can advance the slides now. My contact information will be available at the end of the presentation as well. So if you didn't get it right there, and I can also send out this presentation later. I'm having some computer issues. I'm in the field. So I do appreciate the estuary program assisting with the presentation. So the name of the presentation is a collaborative approach to submerged aquatic vegetation restoration to ensure future ecosystem services in Florida. I'm going to be presenting some more work coming up later this spring at GulfCon. And I think it's in Alabama or Mississippi. And so this is the title of the presentation. This presentation is a little shorter than what will be given there. But the overall idea is that we've been working with lots of partners to identify regions around the state that would benefit from seagrass restoration, whether that's to kickstart restoration or to assist or facilitate current projects where funding may have run out or there's additional services needed, to where our legislative funding enables us to come in and plant certain areas. Next slide, please. So as you can see on this map, there are lots of stars of where a lot of projects have occurred. So in our fiscal year 23-24, Ecosphere was awarded a grant from the state of Florida, as I said, legislative funding, and it was to plant 100 acres around the state. So a statewide effort. Each one of those stars represents a different project area, and you can see in the box there the number of acres installed in different regions of the state. As I mentioned, so I was still the manager up in St. Joseph Bay in 2023 and most of, or some of 2024, excuse me. And during that time, the AquaTech team was able to plant 21 acres and even a little bit after I left. So I think even through the summer of 2024. So a total of 21 acres of seagrass in St. Joseph Bay. And in St. Andrews, they had assisted with some of FWC's seagrass restoration in West Bay. So those two stars up there in the Panhandle coincide with some of those projects. And so to date, or actually we finished planting those 100 acres around the state. And if you go to the next slide, please. And so we partnered with Ecosphere and USF to evaluate a subset of those 100 acres that were planted. And on average, we had a survivorship between 50 to 70%. Some previous efforts really only showed about a 38%, 40% survivorship. And so we felt, pretty good about that. I'll talk about some additional funding in a second. But we did receive additional funding in 2025 and for this year. And last year in 2025, we planted 6 acres late in the summer and the early fall in St. Joseph Bay. And our first effort in late September had an 80% survivorship after 30 days. And in October, we planted closer to a shoal, and we had anywhere between 40 and 60% survivorship at 30-day monitoring. In a week or two, we are due up for a required 6-month monitoring on those St. Joe Bay efforts. I was hoping that we would have gotten up there to be able to share that data with you guys today, but we don't quite have that yet. We will be getting that by the end of the month as required by our permits. So as that information becomes available, I can share it with both the Aquatic Preserve Manager as well as the Estuary Program. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, in 2025 and in this year, we received additional funding through Ecosphere. So we have an additional 70 acres available. So since I've joined AquaTech, I've been reaching out as obviously to, previous partners and collaborators, specifically in the Panhandle, but also all around the state, mostly because a lot of my professional experience has been in the Big Bend and in the Panhandle. But as you'll see in a moment, we've been expanding and identifying and getting areas permitted within the Panhandle, the Indian River Lagoon on the East Coast, and now we're in the northern part, the central part, and the southern part. We're working with getting some permits in Biscayne Bay and South Florida. We're currently finishing some projects, but starting some new projects in Southwest Florida, like in the Cape Coral area. We're going to be doing some work in Key West for some groundings in the Florida Keys. And as you'll see in a moment, we've gotten permitted over 300 acres. And so we are anticipating still receiving more legislative funding in the coming years. We've been using FDEP's new general permit for seagrass restoration. It is a permit designed to be very low to zero impact. For instance, there's no exclusion cages. There's no sediment fill or recontouring of the bottom. It is bare root planting. The plants have to come from a certified aquaculture facility. Is AquaTech partners with Aquaticus Plants, located in Tampa by our offices in Tampa. Basically, the aquaculture facilities harvest plants at permitted donor sites around the state, permitted through the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, and they bring the plants back to our aquaculture facilities where they're grown out, prepared, and then transported to the restoration sites for installation. At times, we harvest plants on site and prepare that day, whether it be in the water or on the shoreline, and either replant that day or the following day. There are ways that we keep plants alive. We have documented success. And we are really looking forward, especially to this upcoming year with these 70 acres permitted, to where we've really spread it around the state to really kickstart or facilitate some seagrass restoration. We're still always looking for more opportunities in freshwater and marine systems. A lot of our new permits are in marine systems. We've been contacting some people about working in some freshwater scenarios, specifically over in the Pensacola area. I know it's a little outside of the St. Andrews and St. Joe Bay Estuary Program, but we've partnered with TNC in the Pensacola Perdido Bay Estuary Program out that way to potentially do some freshwater planting. We also work very closely with our state partners like FWC, to where we have an existing memorandum of understanding or like a contract with FWC where we do a lot of their freshwater planting on the lakes. It's being modified to now include Lake Okeechobee and Lake Kissimmee. This week, like I said, I'm out in the field. We are planting Lake George, which is southwest of Jacksonville in the Palatka area. It's a large lake where last year we planted 92 plus acres of grasses, which was over 1 million plants. A lot of those areas are still successful, and so we've been contracted again to plant again this year for FWC to do approximately the same amount. We've got some new efforts coming up in Okeechobee and Kissimmee as well. We're just getting all those contracts and things finalized. So some exciting things coming up. If you go to the next screen, please. This is my favorite image. So you can see that we've really been trying to spread it around the state. As I mentioned, in Southwest Florida, in the Keys, in Biscayne Bay, we are working on some things, but basically each one of these stars represents some areas that were permitted basically since last summer. So the summer of 2025, we have basically permitted around the state. But as I mentioned, we've been really focusing on the Panhandle, mostly because of my experience up there, knowing the right partners to contact about collaborations, as well as knowing some areas that might benefit or that are in need of seagrass restoration. Just some fun facts. The ones in Tampa, they're just waiting on the Army Corps permits. We've already received the DEP permits and the Tampa Port Authority permits, so they should be turning green soon. We got word that Boca Ciega is going to be approved. They're just waiting to issue until next week when the new nationwide series comes out, so that will be green. The Town of Orchid ones on the Indian River Lagoon, those are about to go green as well. So we're going to have over 300 acres permitted and ready to go. So when partners come to us in different areas and they ask, do we still have that seagrass funding, which includes the cost of the plants as well as the labor to install plants? We already have areas permitted to go, so we can just show up and start planting. If we have, certain organizations where they've received funding, but they're in need of project areas, or that we can facilitate saying, we already have these areas permitted in your watersheds, we're ready to rock and roll. Let's get together and work. So you can see that we are trying to make it a statewide effort. We were going to be doing some other things in the Big Bend between the Fenn Holloway and the Tampa area, but those kind of got put on hold. The reason there is not much in Northeast Florida is there just is not a lot of seagrass up there, especially in the marine environments. There is some freshwater grasses, but there's just not the opportunities like there are, in South Florida and on the Gulf Coast and in the Panhandle. So very excited about our upcoming work. As I mentioned, it's over 300 acres. So while we have 70 ready to go and we plan to spread it around, we anticipate receiving more funding and working with our partners to keep planting away. Next slide, please. Okay, so as I mentioned, in St. Joseph Bay in 2023 and in 2024, my company AquaTech planted 21 acres in the south end of the bay. You can see in the Google Earth image to the left, the red polygon, and then on the right, it's zoomed in. A lot of the previous areas that we planted for the aquatic preserve were near this area, but a lot were further south. For those of you not aware, since about 2018 up until just a couple years ago, the sea urchin problem in St. Joseph Bay really exploded, and they ravaged a bunch of the seagrass beds. Like, they ate it down and they disappeared. The aquatic preserve was in the middle of doing a large-scale BP-funded prop scar restoration project throughout the south end of the bay and on the east end of the bay, to where when we had put in sediment tubes and prop scars where there were existing grass beds all in that south end of the bay, as you can see in the images below, it looks like, sandy areas in between the deep channels. So much seagrass has disappeared from St. Joseph Bay that obviously it made sense for a company like AquaTech and Ecosphere to come in with the funding, so the cost of plants, the labor to do it, to try to restore vital habitat in St. Joseph Bay. Obviously, there's a lot of turtles, there's a lot of fishing, there's a lot of important species that make use of the seagrass habitat. So to try to bring that grass back, it has always been a priority for me, and it still is. So this new area, as we call it there, St. Joe Bay Restoration Area 1, it is about 16 acres. And the reason we selected this area again is because we had done some planting near this kind of shoal area. It's directly across a deep water channel from Black's Island. So again, in the south end of the bay. And this area was selected for a few other reasons. One, it's a very sandy habitat, and there are actually pretty healthy seagrass beds that are still present there on the shoal. And so when we permit areas, if there are some seagrass areas, we do try to include them in the permitted area so we can plant adjacent to them and near them. So the community effort, if you will, allows the seagrass to do better than just trying to plant it out in the open. Some of the previous efforts we had in the south end of the bay, further south, where we tried to plant some areas that were wide open, they basically were a free buffet for turtles, like, unfortunately, or there was washout conditions just due to the instability of the sediment. When there's no seagrasses or anything down there, just the wave action and the currents and things can wash out plants. We didn't use any exclusionary cages. So again, when you just put them out, they're not really near anything else, and the turtles and other critters are down there that are herbivores, they do tend to flock to it. So some of the efforts we had in St. Joe Bay did not work out so much previously. But as I mentioned a few slides ago, this is the area that we planted in September and October. And if you go to the next slide, please. This is how we break that area down. Each one of these squares is a 1 acre square. And so once we had the polygon, once we had the permits, it was like, where do we want to start? And we started in the bottom right area. So with squares 20 and 13. So if you go to the next slide, please. We started in box 20, mostly because the winds were going to be elevated out of the north. And so we wanted to work on the south end of the shoal for those days. We also know that there's the grass beds, the existing grass beds that were in there. And so we planted number 20 first, some of it, and then we finished 20 and planted most of 13 on the second trip. Next slide, please. So the blue area in section 20 is what we planted in September. We put in 2 acres worth of plants. I know that sounds weird. For our funding deliverables, 4,800 planting units is the equivalent of 1 acre of seagrass restoration. So that is, planting units are different for each species of grass. With thalassia or turtle grass, we tend to have like 1 to 2 really good roots, and then we have a certain number of blades associated with each short shoot, and we install them by hand, sometimes using a little shovel to lift the sediment up and then plant the plants. You will see in a minute. So as you can see, the blue area is only about 0.33 acres, but we put in 2 acres worth of plants, so 9,600 plants. So basically what that ends up to being is that we put, like, the ratio or the density is that we're putting in 6 acres of plants into 1 acre or 1 physical acre. What that does, or how that translates, is we did a lot less than 3-foot spacing. We did 1 to 2 foot spacing in most areas. Again, is working with the plants closer together and working in conjunction with the existing seagrass beds. It really improves the chance of survivability. Like I said, too, within that 30 days of those blue areas that were planted, we had 75 to 80% survivorship. So when we came out to plant the green part of 20 and the square to the south of that 13, that's when we did our 30-day monitoring, and we knew the plants were very healthy and still surviving. This was also when the red tide was hitting St. Joe Bay last summer, if you all recall. So we might have lucked out that some of our normal herbivory friends were not around as much. They might have been deterred, which actually gave the plants time to take root and establish themselves. Next slide, please. These areas were only planted with turtle grass. Sometimes we also use haliduli in St. Joseph Bay or shoal grass. We try to plant like the native Florida species, but we do site inspections and things like that ahead of time to know what species are there. So we're not trying to introduce new species into the bay or the water bodies or to change up the population dynamics there at the site. It's again to facilitate or kickstart seagrass restoration. We're not trying to change anything. So when we went back out to plant in October, we were able to plant another 0.28 acres in the 1.7 acres to maintain that 6-to-1 planting ratio to basically fill up the rest of that 20 block. And then we also planted about half an acre in number 13 because there is that existing grass, but we put in 2.3 acres worth of plants there as well. The survivorship was decreased there a little bit, we think, because it's a little closer to the south end of the shoal, so a little more exposed to currents and other conditions that might have resulted in washout and things like that. Sometimes there are, installation, errors or things like that. The plants aren't buried well enough, and that's on our company. That's just part of the seagrass, finickiness as well. If it's not planted correctly, if the sediment isn't 100% the same, if there's some slight salinity differences, sometimes that can impact restoration success. But so far, so good. And as I said, we'll be doing our required 6-month monitoring coming up here in the next couple weeks for square 20, those first areas that were planted in square 20. And then a few weeks later, we'll be going back up to monitor the areas there remaining in 20 as well as in 13. And as soon as things warm up a little bit more up there, we do plan to plant some more grasses this summer. We don't really have a set plan yet. A lot of it depends on environmental conditions. We keep thinking we're getting out of the cold weather, but I think next week there's another round of it coming. So trying to plant in the Panhandle makes it a little trickier than say areas like South Florida, just because of the differences in the temperature and things like that. Next slide, please. So these are some photos, from when we plant. You can see that we do put in a pretty, is each one of those clumps of grass, that is one planting unit. So when I say that we put in 2 acres of planting units, that's 9,600 clumps of grass like that. So we were putting that into 1/3 of an acre or 1/2 of an acre, things like that. So really reducing the spacing to increase the survivorship, to decrease the sediment moving around in there, to improve water clarity, to reduce the wave energy, things like that seagrasses do that benefit the bay, but they also do it to increase their survivorship as well. The little shovel in the bottom right is something we've designed to where we can just dig down enough and lift up the sediment to where we can put in these larger planting units. The way that we do install the units, you can see in the upper right-hand box, is that basically they are prepared and they're transported around on floating trays, and one person at the surface passes the plants to the people in the water using normally mask and snorkel. Sometimes in deeper waters we'll use scuba, but in these areas here in St. Joe, it was just mask and snorkel. Again, these last 2 efforts involved just planting thalassia or turtle grass. In 2024, I know we planted both haliduli and thalassia. And what that involves is that haliduli tends to be a bit more of a robust species where it has a wider salinity tolerance range, a wider temperature tolerance range, as well as it's not as picky about sediment as, say, manatee grass or turtle grass. And so a lot of the times you can plant haliduli in areas to kickstart grass regrowth, and in something called compressed succession is the natural surrounding beds tend to slowly outgrow and overtake those shoal grass areas to where it fills in with the natural surrounding turtle grass. There's documented scientific stuff about this. Research, I say stuff, sorry. There are published works about this process working, and we've seen it work in St. Joseph Bay. And anecdotally, that with our PropScar project that was going on with the BP funded project and some of the monitoring areas, Haladuli was growing into the PropScars faster than some of the turtle grass, and that's just a natural process. But again, over time, the thalassia will grow in and overtake the shoal grass and fill in the natural communities. So sometimes we would plant 2 acres of turtle grass and 1 acre of Haladuli to increase coverage and to increase survivorship of the grasses in these areas. Next slide, please. So in St. Andrews, as I mentioned, in West Bay, the picture on the right, the red polygon, which sort of fits into the puzzle piece shape of the green polygon. The red polygon is FWC's seagrass restoration effort that's occurred over the past few years. And so we coordinated with Becca and her team about how they felt about additional planting in this area. Us using the donor beds that she has permitted in that area, working together to continue to restore in West Bay. So we went ahead and permitted this approximate 20-acre area to be able to have flexibility to plant different sides of it, to try different spacings and different efforts in coordination with FWC. We are planning on being up, as I said, in the Panhandle this spring and summer and into the early fall to get these areas, but to get some grasses in these areas to see if restoration will continue to occur and be successful. And again, with our funding, it allows no cost of plants and no cost of labor. So if things don't work, it's kind of no harm, no foul. But if things work, it's amazing and at no cost to our partners. Next slide, please. We also worked with our friends at the Aquatic Preserve. So in the picture on the right, you can see the Spanish Ante sort of area there. But so this is Shell Island Sound. The main St. Andrews Inlet is covered up by the green polygon photo on the left. But so, all the way down at the end of Shell Island Sound there, kind of down by Tyndall, the Aquatic Preserve has had a water quality station as well as a seagrass monitoring station for multiple years, to where we've known that seagrasses do occur and there are continuous beds down there, but there's also been loss. We've looked at imagery throughout the years that's available either online or acquired from our partners, and we consulted with the Aquatic Preserve as to different areas like where we think it would be most successful. And due to low boat traffic and appropriate salinities and existing species, we landed on this area, so number 11, all the way down at the end. It's only about 7 acres, but you can see there's lots of open space. It's a very protected area, and it does. There's been 4 native species documented down there in the past. So stargrass or Halophila species, the shoal grass, Haladuli, manatee grass, or Serengodium, as well as thalassia. So we've permitted this area to start off with probably Haladuli and thalassia, but if we continue to see success, we might introduce some of the other species as well. But we would coordinate. While again, it's just outside of the Aquatic Preserve, they have that monitoring data, they have that water quality data, and we've sort of leaned into them for some expertise on opinions and site selection. So this is another area that we're really looking forward to getting some grass in. Again, it's got a soft spot in my heart for after spending 8 years managing these areas, being through Hurricane Michael. It's extremely important to try to restore some of these habitats. Next slide, please. Okay. Before I talk about what's next for us, I did not include, and I apologize for this. We've also been coordinating with FWC to replant the El Dorado grounding site there that is near the FSU Panama City campus in North Bay. For those of you not familiar, the El Dorado was a large boat that grounded there in North Bay as a result of Hurricane Michael. And when they removed it off the shallows, it left a big, dragged through the seagrass and left a big open area. Previously, it was it was filled in with some sediment tubes and then planted with some grasses from donor marshes located right there on site. However, the sediment that was used was different than the actual existing sediment, so it became very loose and loamy. And a lot of the planting effort that was previous done a few years ago, it just didn't have great results. So we reached out to FWC. Tim and Rice is in charge of the derelict vessel program, and we talked about potentially trying to help out with other grounding efforts to replant those, but he brought up the El Dorado. So I think it's going to be in late April or in early May. We're going to be replanting the remainder of that grounding site. It's about 1/4 of an acre, but we're going to put in 1 acre's worth of plants, possibly even 2 acres worth of plants to really try to restore that grounding site. So when we get some better photos and some good stuff, we'd be more than happy to share that information, data wise, photo wise. I just forgot to include it here. I apologize. I thought about it this week in the field, and I don't know why I didn't include it. But so we do have a lot planned for the St. Joseph and the St. Andrews area. So we're very excited about that. As I mentioned, we are still looking for additional places to plant. We can work with private owners. We can work with local, state, and federal governments, nonprofits, and so on and so forth. The sky's the limit pretty much. And so, we're always reaching out, trying to assist other people too. Like I mentioned, if there's existing projects that have run out of money, but would benefit from some seagrass planting or additional environmental services, that's what we're here for. We are very, very excited about trying to get up in the Panhandle. As I mentioned, it has a soft spot for me, but also based on our success, planting previously in the Panhandle, we are very much looking forward to this planting season coming up. Next slide, please. Okay, just real quick, some other cool things that AquaTech does. As I mentioned, we are an environmental restoration company, but we do mostly seagrass work. But we have the ability to do seagrass surveys. We assist with permitting, restoration and mitigation, planning, monitoring, and mapping. We do have a corral of drones, and we've just acquired some new boat drones. So in the bottom right-hand picture, to where we can map submerged bottoms, we can actually map our planted areas and program the unit to stop and hover over monitoring points and take pictures for us. It can record all sorts of side scan and down scan data. So we are working out some kinks that have come up recently, but we are using that in the Keys right now as sort of, demonstrating what we can do. But it will really assist us in some future mapping and monitoring efforts. So we are letting people know that we have that capability. We do living shoreline restoration. We assist with permitting there. So we have an oyster recycling program, or we have shell available. We have the ability to, build breakwaters and things like that. So we have crews and things we can assist with monitoring. As I mentioned, with the shellfish restoration, we have a recycled oyster shell program working with local restaurants down in the Tampa area. But with the drones, we have the ability to use these heavy lift agri drones to disperse, oyster, clam, and scallop spat. So there in that middle picture, when I was up there in the Panhandle, we worked with the AquaTech worked with the Florida State Coastal and Marine Lab with Sandra Brook, and they tested out using these drones to be able to disperse the oyster spat over subtidal reef as well as intertidal reefs. And there was some research done to determine the accuracy and the efficacy of these efforts. And we are continuing to get work to use our drones to disperse the spat. Believe it or not, all you need is a special activity license through FWC to be able to disperse this spat. So when there's projects coming up, or that there's areas where you would want to try this out, the hard part's getting the spat, I guess, is finding available spat and things like that. We can use anything up to 6 to 8 millimeters in size. Our largest drone can carry a 150-pound payload, whereas some of the smaller ones can carry like 20 to 30 pounds. But basically, it involves us not having to be out on the boat in rough conditions or anything like that, to where we can program the drones to disperse the payload and come back and reprogram it and send it back out to where we can disperse millions of spat in a short amount of time. We are working to get as many of these efforts going around the state as possible. We also have hyperspectral camera abilities on our drones as well for survey and mapping purposes. So we are ready to assist with any sort of environmental work. And finally, we do a lot of education and outreach. We go to conferences. We take advantage of opportunities like this to share what we're doing with the public. We like going to outreach events and things like that as well, to be able to talk about what we do and potentially meet new partners and be able to establish just some additional work. I was about to say partnership again, but that would have been extra repetitive and redundant. So next slide, please. I think that's the end of my presentation. There's my contact info at the bottom. I am actually located in Jacksonville. I run our satellite office. Our main office is located down in Tampa. It's adjacent to the Aquaticus Plants facility, the certified aquaculture area. My cell phone or my email that's listed up there is the best way to get a hold of me. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions that anybody might have, or if you'd prefer to reach out privately, that's perfectly fine too. But I appreciate the time. I wish I could have been there in person. We're just shorthanded, and we're working on this Lake George project right now. So soon enough, we'll be back up in the Panhandle, and when we do, we'll be reaching out to hopefully be able to at least check in with our friends up there. So thank you again for the opportunity.
Thanks, John. I guess we'll start with anyone who has questions in the room. Any questions?
I'm curious about one thing. You said you're looking for other opportunities, and you listed this, that, and private. I mean, if a private owner says, hey, I would like seagrass planted out in front of my place, does that happen?
It can happen. Using our funding typically involves needing to be on or near state submerged lands. But if the private lands overlap the state submerged lands, which they tend to do a lot of the time, especially in St. Joe, we are able to plant. So if a private homeowner had a living shoreline project, for instance, in their backyard, and they wanted to plant some seagrass behind it to where they knew seagrass was previously there, we would be able to get that permitted or modify the existing permit that was used to build the living shoreline to potentially incorporate some grasses. It's not always guaranteed, but it would be something to where if you wanted to find out for sure, you could send me some information and I could do some research and see if a private homeowner's property would qualify for our funding. Now, as I mentioned, our funding is, with no cost of plants and no cost of labor. However, if it's not on state lands or anything like that where there's that overlap, it doesn't mean that we can't do the project. It just wouldn't be covered by our funding, so it would come at the expense of the client or the partner. So we are trying to locate areas to where it's at no cost to anybody, so it's a win-win. But again, we do have, it would be something that if it was something someone really wanted, we could make that happen.
What does that mean on state land? What would that mean out in West Bay?
So the state owns a lot of the submerged bottom, and sometimes private properties extend out into the water based on where whenever the property boundaries were established, however many years ago. In a lot of the areas around the state of Florida is the state. So DEP, or the Water Management District, they are the ones that actually own the submerged lands. There are times where there are leases given out to other agencies. And as I said, there is sometimes the overlap of the private home ownership The best example I can give you is in the south end of St. Joseph Bay. A lot of the homes along the waterfront there, they have property lines that extend out into the water, like a good 200 feet. But if you look on some of the state boundaries and things like that for like the aquatic preserve, like they do sometimes overlap. So if there's that unique situation, we are able to use our funding to be able to plant those areas. If it was solely a private land area, we could not use our funding, but we could definitely do the work.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Do you have different success rates when you transplant different species?
That's a very good question. Currently, I do not think that we do, or if we do, I don't know, or I haven't seen those reports. Some of our previously permitted areas where we've planted, they either did not require monitoring, or it was we just don't have that data. A lot of the time, we get hired to do the planting effort or the quote unquote construction effort to where the client or the partner is then responsible for the monitoring. Most of the work we do where we've had really good success rates that documented are solely with Haliduli and Thalassia. Those are the two species that we use the most. So this year, as we continue to meet the requirements of the general permit for seagrass restoration, where monitoring is 30 days, 180 days, and then annually for 3 years, we do hope to acquire more information. We get this question a lot, and while we do have documented success around the state, we do have gaps, and there's not enough data, and we'd love to have more data to show our success rates. So we do have some, but not for every species. No.
I guess I have one more. When you plant an area, is it marked like to keep boats out and prevent prop scars and so forth?
That's a great question. A lot of the time, we do not. We don't want to draw attention to the area. We also try to pick areas that are not heavily trafficked area. So I know the area there, by Black's Island, is potentially near some of those deep water channels, but it's on such a shallow area that really only the experienced charter guy is going to try to boat across, or someone who's been down there. You can't even boat across those areas in the wintertime. It gets so low. So we try to avoid areas of heavy traffic, heavy recreation use. There are certain permit conditions that require us to be a certain distance from navigation channels. We wear a lot of safety gear when we're out there, so we are visible. But again, we do have the option in our permits to put up signage for, say, caution shallow seagrass area or restoration effort in effect, but that involves also a more thorough permitting process to where you have to drive signs into the ground. And there's a lot more involved with the Army Corps and DEP to get permitted. Then there's the maintenance of the signage and the responsibility and all that stuff. So a lot of the time we try not to do a lot of signage. Like, one, again, is to not draw attention to it, but then also is to be as least impactful as possible. So not driving an extra signage or not having any other thing that could become a potential hazard or navigational hazard, or trap any other species or anything like that. So we do take that into account a lot of the time. For instance, the area there in Shell Island Sound is all the way down at the end to where there's very little boat traffic. So, a lot of people like to go to Shell Island area for, boating, but when you get in that far east end, there tends to be very, very few people. We also looked at the potential, or the interest of the East Pass being reopened, and we didn't want to potentially permit an area that might be impacted if and when that ever happens. So we looked at that as well to be like, well, if they, do dredge that back open, what's that going to do to the water quality at that end? So we look at lots of aspects when doing site selection, but we also work very closely with our partners to see what they think about it. So for instance, we'll suggest areas and we rely on that feedback, and we'll either move or we'll adjust the size of the polygons to make sure everybody's content with the site selection.
I actually have a question about the drone usage.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
how do you measure success when you're deploying SPAT with the drones?
So I know originally with the FSU Marine Lab, a lot of it was the accuracy of that it was falling, like from the drone and actually landing on the site. So for instance, we were standing on the St. George Island Bridge, the fishing pier, and we were flying the drone out to where the Florida State Marine Lab was in a boat, and they were over some of the subtidal reefs, and we would fly the drone out and fly it over there, and they would have floating baskets on the water. And so when the payload dropped, it was actually landing in those baskets, so it was landing on the reefs. So the accuracy is there. In terms of the restoration success, we do not have that data. But it is, putting live spat onto these reefs to where, we do hope that the attach works. This is being used around the state by other companies as well. I just don't have any direct published material from us. The Florida State Marine Lab, though, Dr. Sandra Bruck, she would have some of that information, like regarding some of their research using the drones and things like that, that if people are interested, I could contact her, or you could contact her directly to find out. I know in the Indian River Lagoon, they're starting to use this as well. They're using this with clams. So it's a little different than the oyster work, to where you're just kind of dropping them. One thing we're really, really interested in is scallops. We want to try to bring back the scallops, not so much, or not. We would like to bring the populations back to where, possibly there could be like solid recreation again, but to bring the species back. So obviously we know they've really sort of disappeared in St. Andrews, and they were good in St. Joe for a while, but they've really tapered off, or there's such a fluctuation that they've had to, shorten harvesting seasons and things like that. So we are looking into scallop restoration using the drones as well. So lots of opportunities, but not a lot of data yet, unfortunately.
Any questions online?
Not drawn in the chat. I have a quick question. You might have said this earlier and I missed it because I came in a few minutes late, but do you do anything to help mitigate the sea urchin population that's been a problem? Or is that out of what you do?
So that's a fun fact, or a fun question. When I was a manager there, and even not sure if they did it after I left, but we partnered with FWC, and we partnered with the estuary program. And I say we, being FDP at the time, partnered with AquaTech, so the aquatic preserve, where we did sea urchin roundups, where it's kind of like the scallop roundup or the scallop rodeo that exists, to where we had volunteers go out and collect as many urchins as they could from hot spots, if you will. So we would go out with FWC and identify large populations of scallops of sea urchins, and we would collect them and relocate them to different parts of the bay, particularly deeper water and further away. So the thought there was to have them find other food sources, or it would just be so far away that they would not want to return to where they were damaging the seagrass beds. While it's a great idea and a great thought, it just really wasn't that effective because there were so many. It was more of an education and outreach tool than it was. It was, to make people aware of the situation, to teach people about seagrass, and to involve the community in potential restoration efforts. But unfortunately, the last time we spoke with FWC, they said if they wanted to continue doing this, it wouldn't be to relocate, it would be to eliminate. And that's kind of where we stopped doing things. We don't necessarily want to kill critters. That's not really our decision. So in terms of trying to mitigate, some seagrass stuff now. So if we were to plant, for example, in an area that was having an urchin problem, that's where we could use exclusion cages, things that are used to keep out turtles and manatees. They're low profile, not navigational hazards per se. They do keep critters out, but they involve a lot of maintenance, and they get clogged up and things like that too, to where sometimes they become more of a hassle and things like that. But in terms of alleviating any of the urchin situations, we have not been involved in anything more than assisting partners with the roundup.
All right, anyone else? A lot of good questions. Alrighty. Thank you, John. Appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much again. Like, I really miss that area a whole lot. I know Meg is actually doing a great job as the aquatic preserve manager now. You know, she was involved in a lot of the projects I talked about previously. So if anybody does have questions about what the aquatic preserve is doing in terms of seagrass monitoring and restoration or what they've done, I would really suggest reaching out to her. If anybody does have any needs, like I see Daryl Boudreau online. I'm going to ping you soon, Daryl, because of the new swim plan, basin plans. We have areas permitted within those target sub basins that we would love to partner with the Water Management District to potentially replant some of those areas. But I'll be reaching out to you through email soon, man. But those are the kind of partnerships that, you know, we've established over the years, and we continue to work together. So those are just some great examples with the estuary program. When we come up to redo the El Dorado, we'll be contacting you guys to potentially be able to access property there, involve maybe some volunteers to help with plant preparation, or just to have you guys on site, like sort of even documenting it or observing it. So we aren't shy about what we do. We have everything in the open and just always looking for new partnerships and new opportunities. So again, you know, please feel free to reach out, you know, via contact info. I encourage you guys to check out our website, aquatecheco.com. It has a lot more descriptions about our staff, our projects, things like that. So please do feel free to reach out. But again, thank you so much for your time. I really, really do appreciate it.
Before you go, I do think there is one. I saw a hand up.
No, they were clapping.
They're clapping. Oh, okay. Okay. All right.
All good.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much, and take care.
Hey, thanks, John. Thanks for coming on.
Here.
Bye.
Yeah, I thought there were hands up first too, and then I realized. Wait, absolutely. I mean, that was.
All right. So coming up next in April, we have a guest speaker coming at FWC, and we're going to learn about gopher tortoises to celebrate Gopher Tortoise Day on April 10th. The meeting is going to be on the 9th, but we're celebrating a little bit early. And then in May, we're trying to get a speaker in to learn about some you can find a creek and springs that feed our watershed. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Then please